Hi guys, Paul here, and today we're going to be taking a look at making fire using iron pyrites. Iron pyrites, for those that don't know, is a form of natural iron that can be found along the coastline, and it can be combined with a piece of flint to produce sparks. Those sparks can then be caught using Amadou, which is from a horseshoe fungus. We've discussed this in a previous video, feel free to go and check that out. Catch the spark on that, and then we can transfer that spark into dry grass. So I'm out here today just taking a break from the beginner series and testing myself. I've come out with absolutely no kit, no knives, no nothing, and I want to get myself a fire going. So I'm going to bring you guys along for the ride and show you the process, and I hope it's helpful to you and you enjoy it. So let's get started. Okay folks, so the first thing we're going to do is just take a look at the materials we're going to be using. Some very specific materials, and they all work together for a very particular reason. So first, and probably most importantly, is the iron pyrites. Now I have to admit, I'm not the best when it comes to rock types. This isn't iron pyrites as I would typically know it. It's kind of like a marcasite iron pyrites mix. It's a very fine grained structure, whereas from what I know, typical iron pyrites, or fool's gold as it's known, tends to have a much kind of chunkier grain structure. So maybe one of you guys will know better than me what this is exactly, but for the sake of this video we'll refer to it as iron pyrites. As you can see, I've been using this a lot, and as you strike this with a flint, which is how we produce the sparks, you can see you're slowly wearing away at the surface of this. Now this will last a long time, don't get me wrong, but you'd be surprised at just how much material you actually end up taking off during this process. Talking about taking off material, the next important piece would be flint. Flint obviously is what we use to strike the iron pyrites to produce sparks, and these sparks that come off are very, very dull. You probably won't even be able to see them in daylight, to be honest, so for the sake of this video we're going to shift inside the shelter a wee bit so you can see them. But the flint I'm using, nothing special about it. I have a few pieces here. It's nice to have a few pieces just to kind of change bits around and just see what works. You'll find a bit that works better than some other pieces. For me this is this bit, and the bit I use here is this edge. Now I always thought that using a nice skinny edge, something like this perhaps, was best. However, having done this a few times now, I found that having a much thicker edge tends to help, because you're not fracturing flint everywhere, and it also helps to have a nice big bit of flint, because that way you've got weight behind your strike. It's all on the wrist. You don't want to force it into each other, you kind of just want to flick it against each other. And having a bit of a weighty flint helps with that. Having the thicker edge also means that it's not going to break off, and it should last a wee bit longer. I suppose another thing to note is that you can use quartz and chert and all sorts of different types of rock to strike your iron pyrites. However, in my part of the world, flint tends to be the preferred option. So the sparks we produce using this have to be caught, and like I say, the sparks that come off that are incredibly dull, not very hot at all, so we need a really, really fine fibre to catch those sparks. And what we use for that is Amadou. Now this is from a horseshoe fungus. Now like I say, we've done a video on these in the past, and feel free to go back and check it out. I'll explain in more detail in that video than I will in this one. But it's a type of fungus. It grows on birch, and inside it has what's known as a trauma layer. That's a layer just underneath the skin here, or the cuticle as it's known, and it's a very, very fine, soft, fibrous layer. Now I've extracted that. All I've done is extract it and dry it, and that's it. You can see I have a piece here that I've been using in the past, and hopefully you can see there just how fine those fibres are. They really are super fine, like cotton wool almost. Now this can be used to maintain your ember after you've got it. As you can see, I've burnt a hole in this one here, and it's another useful sort of application of this. Not only do you get your ember by creating a little ember amongst all this dust, but the ember then kind of burns down the way and then takes hold in the Amadou, and then you've got like insurance. Again, I've done a video on insurance in the past, feel free to go and check that out. But basically what it means is, if you take your pile off of this, your pile of fine fibres, put it into your dry grass to blow it to flame, and it doesn't work, you then have this still burning in the background as backup or insurance. Now, speaking of blowing to flame, what I'm going to be blowing into flame today is just this dry grass, and absolutely nothing special about it. Picked it up on the way here. Everyone should know what dry grass is. You can find it best along fields and stuff like that, out in open patches when you're in the woods, and make sure it's as dry as possible. And we'll go into kind of the prepping of this prior to putting the ember in, but that doesn't really involve much. So that's it, that's our materials for today, and this is what we're going to try and make fire with. As you can see, it's not a lot, and the reason I like it as a fire lighting method is because of how compact it is. So you could carry, you know, that in a little pouch quite easily, whereas something like a bow drill or a hand drill, you know, friction fire, they tend to have quite long spindles, and they're not as portable, and they're much more prone to dampness, where obviously the flint and the iron pyrites aren't going to be affected by wet. All you have to do is make sure you keep this dry. So really nice and portable. It's like a pocket fire kit from the Stone Age, basically. You may have heard of the expression hitting two stones together to make fire. That's where this originates, and people often think of it as kind of a dumb brutish act done by cavemen back in the day, but really it's quite a sophisticated understanding of materials and how they work together and how to make the most of the sparks and stuff they produce. So that's enough talking. We'll take ourselves inside the shelter so you can see the sparks that this produces, and then we'll talk a bit about prepping the Amadou, prepping the grass, and then we'll give it a go. Okay folks, so let's give this a go. So, as we were talking about, we're going to be striking this to produce the sparks. Now, there's a few different ways of striking it, and I have my personal favourites. So I'll show you what they are. Now, some people will hold it, I'm left-handed so I make everything look a lot more difficult. Some people will hold it like this and use this to strike down to produce sparks. And that works for them. I've seen it work perfectly well. But for me, what I like to do is either hold it in my hand like this or like this, and quite often you'll see me switching between the two. Now, the reason I like to do it this way is because you've got the wrist support there, and what that does is stop you from kind of hitting this and pushing it down into your tinder, but it also means that the support of your wrist here stops this from coming through and hitting your material underneath. And of course, the last thing you want to do is just knock all your material off. So personally, I like to do it that way. I have a few favourite bits of flint, and as I say, I like a nice thick sort of edge. I tend to use the same bit repeatedly because I get success with it, and you can see it's kind of working its way into the flint there. And again, I like to use this method. For me, it just feels more controlled. I can see the sparks better. I can kind of judge where they're going to go. So that's the way I'm going to be doing it. Now, the preparation of our Amadou, I've done a wee bit here already, and you can see this is what we're aiming to make. Really, really fine, nice, soft fibres. Now, the way we do that using flint tools is to get a nice sharp edge, something like this here, and just scrape along the Amadou, and you'll produce nice, fine fibres. So I've done a wee bit already just to speed up the process. I'll do a wee bit more. Nothing fancy, just you want as much as you can get, really. The reason being that these sparks are going to go all over the place, and the wider area you have, the more chance you have of one of those sparks landing in the right place. So it's always better to have more than less. Okay, so you can see there I've got quite a good pile. Now your pile doesn't need to be high, it needs to be wide. So what I mean by that is more surface area, don't worry so much about height. Because when we get that ember we can move this fluff around on top of the ember to encourage it to grow. So that should be enough for me. Now again, this can take anywhere from, my previous record was 47 minutes. Yesterday I did a live stream on Facebook. Some of you might have seen that, and I got 3 embers in 25 minutes. So how long it can take is really kind of dependent on your luck. So what I'm going to do is just hold this above my Amadou and just have a few knocks. Now you'll see sparks come down, they'll land on the Amadou, they'll burn for maybe a second and then they'll burn out. What you want is that one spark that's hot enough that it'll stay there and burn for that little bit longer. What you'll see me do when I get a spark that lands on is quickly start fanning it. Now I don't want to fan it really hard because I'll blow all my my tinder away. Just a little bit of oxygen going into it to help the ember coalesce. Now once we get that ember, we're going to be putting it into this dry grass here. As you can see, it's not a big pile. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes here. The bigger pile I had would be enough for making a real fire, but for demonstration purposes this is it. Now as you can see, this has got like a kind of bird nest shape about it, and what that does is let you sit your ember right in the middle of that grass, so you're getting maximum exposure to the ember, to the grass in there, and it allows you to kind of cover it over so it's not going to fall out and you can blow on it. So that's always sitting there ready at the side, and there are things you can put in this grass to better your odds, like cattails for instance, or certain seeds and stuff like that will help. But for this, for keeping it as raw and as pure as possible, just straight dry grass. So I've got my tinder ready, I've got my grass ready. Now all I have to do is get a spark to land in the right place. This may end up being sped up, depends on how long it takes. Hopefully you'll be able to see the sparks. Okay, so I can see the sparks, they're landing in the right general area. It's just about getting one to land in the right place now, which is sheer luck. There's not really much you can do about it. Okay, so I've got an ember there. I just need to encourage it to build and coalesce. Make sure it's got plenty of fuel. Just gently aiding it. Now it should smoulder very well on its own. Amadou, because it's so fine, really doesn't need a lot of help to get going. Okay, you can see the ember there. I'm just putting all this material on top of it to allow it to coalesce and become a big ember that gives us the best chance of getting our fire going. So just putting the material on top. Now it's important not to rush this stage. I like to leave it just for a little bit longer to make sure that it burns through into the Amadou below it, so that you end up with that insurance possibility like we talked about. Keep an eye on it, make sure it's not smothering itself or anything like that. Again, don't panic. So I'm going to get my grass here. Just have that little bowl in the middle ready. Now I'm going to pick up my Amadou. Just give it one last little kick of oxygen. I can pick up my Amadou on this little sheet. And what I'm going to do is tip it into the middle of my grass. Now you may find it doesn't want to come off, and if that's the case, set your grass down, get a bit of flint and scrape it off. The reason this happens is because as the ember is burning, it wants to coalesce and stick together and stick to the Amadou below it. Okay, so that's in there now. I'm going to cup my grass around it gently, allow it to establish a little bit more. Again, feeding it plenty of oxygen, no rush, and blow on it gently until you feel the heat building and the grass starting to take. There we have it. Nice gentle flame. Turn it over so the burning takes hold of all the grass. Move your Amadou out of the way so you've got it for later on should you need it. And again, this is just for demonstration purposes, but now I would be applying my sticks, my small tinder, and then working up my fire like I usually would. Now again, I like to have my grass kind of tight compared to most people. The reason for that is it tends to act more like a single unit instead of lots of little bits of grass. What I mean by that is when it's stuck together, it will stay as one big ember essentially, and even though the flame can be out, you can blow on it and the heat from that big ember will still ignite small kindling. So I like to have mine quite tight. Not too tight, otherwise you won't be able to blow it, but just tight enough that it will stick together, and I'll demonstrate that to you just now. Okay, so you can see the fire is all but out apart from this little section here. When I blow on it, however, one very, very big and hot ember. And you can even blow it black into flame, even though it looks like all the grass has been burnt off. Okay folks, so that's essentially it. Again, it can take 5 minutes, it can take 50 minutes. Don't be disheartened. Like I say, it took me 50 minutes my first time round, and as I've practiced, there is a bit of technique in the wrist and how you strike the iron pyrites, and basically all you want to do is have a bit of a limp wrist and just let them bang together very kind of abruptly. So you don't want it to be like you're glancing off, you want it to be like your flint's kind of sort of almost parallel with the ground, and you're hitting it, and that's what's forcing the sparks down the way. If you hold it like this and you hit it, the chances are you're going to push it this way and the sparks are going to go this way. If you hold it like this and you knock it down, and when you knock it down you're knocking it straight, so you're knocking it, the pyrites going straight, the sparks then go down in that general area. That's just what I found in my personal experience. Some people, may have other ways of doing it. So now we've done that, let's go and have a chat about kind of my tips and tricks, and just some advice I can give you guys when you first try this. Okay folks, so there we have it. I hope you enjoyed that little demonstration. It's one of those skills you really need to practice to get better at. The first time, as I've said repeatedly, it took me 47 minutes to do that, and I think I did it there in maybe under 5 or 10, which is, unbelievable difference. But it's just practice, finding a nice bit of flint that works for you, having a nice bit of iron pyrites helps as well. But it's a real teacher of patience. You have to sit there and just hope for the best, and you can either do that or you can't. Having different stuff in your grass, like I mentioned, I had just straight dry grass. You can put stuff like seed heads in there, cattails. I could have worked my grass more, and that would have increased my chances of fire. But as you saw there, the embers that come off the Amadou are actually hot enough that you don't really need any of that extra stuff, although there is absolutely no harm in having it in there. Again, really nice small pocket-sized kit, and it's a really underrated tool for primitive fire, I believe. As someone who does a lot of hand drill and bow drill, iron pyrites, although it takes longer, it's less energy intensive, less calories used to make that fire. And I also like the fact that if you have a dry space and a dry piece of Amadou, you can get a fire going. Whereas if you have a bow drill or a hand drill set that's wet, then obviously you're going to struggle. So anyway guys, I'll try and keep this video short. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Let me know your experiences with it, if you've ever tried it. And also let me know your preferred kind of primitive fire methods as well. If there's anything else you'd like me to showcase, again, just let me know, and I'll do that. We'll go back to Bushcraft for Beginners on Thursday, and then we'll see what happens after that. So thanks for watching guys, all the best, and I'll see you again soon.